So, are coaching platforms friends or foes? Well, to answer this question, I suggest a guided journey through the new reality that coaching platforms are creating in our profession. With the ICF standards and values as a compass, I will try to sort out promising new developments from marketing hype. I also see this session as an opportunity to reflect on our profession as it is evolving and to look into our professional future. My ultimate ambition is to enhance our ability to make informed decisions about our collaborations with coaching platforms. I'm Edith Coron. I'm an executive coach, PCC ICF. I'm a coach supervisor and author, and I'm based in Paris, France. I chair the ICF France Committee on Digital, Artificial Intelligence and Coaching, and I contributed the chapter on these topics to the Coach's Handbook that was published by Routledge in October 2020. And today I do speak in my own name, of course, but also on behalf of the ICF France Committee on Digital, Artificial Intelligence and Coaching. So perhaps first allow me to introduce our committee. It was the first ICF committee group on this topic and the first in any professional coaching organization. We formed as a committee after December 2018 and an initial conference which we organized at ICF France, which title was deliberately provocative: Will Artificial Intelligence Be Tomorrow's Coach? I won't summarize this conference, but enough to say that that created the basis for our work. And by then we were just scratching the surface as a group of our committee, but as a profession. So the committee's aim, we gave ourselves this aim, this purpose, and I'll share them with you. They were, and they still are today, to follow the development of artificial intelligence and digital in the coaching field, to inform ICF members and the coaching profession in general of such developments, which is a little bit what I'm doing today, and to contribute to the debate about the role of artificial intelligence and digital in our coaching profession, particularly with regards to ethical matters. So I'm absolutely delighted that ICF Global has given me the opportunity to host this session today at the Converge conference to fulfill our committee's aims with a global audience. Before diving into the topic per se, I think it is important to pause for a moment and take in our context. We can see that the transformation coaching is experiencing is basically based on 4 converging trends. And this transformation is emerging in some places, but it's already solidly established in others. So what are these 4 trends? 1, innovations in digital technology. 2, coaching is a growing business. 3, increase in the number of coaches on the market. And 4, large investments in coaching platforms. I will develop briefly these 4 points. Digital technologies, as we all know, are ubiquitous. The coaching world is no exception to our 4.0 reality. In 2010, only half the US coaches indicated that phone coaching was a regular part of their practice. 10 years later, and a year and a half into the COVID pandemics, coaches have massively moved to remote practice with cheap online communication tools. But not only, virtual reality is now used in coaching, and AI, artificial intelligence, facial recognition of emotions, is already being tested by some platforms. So that's for a very brief summary of the innovations. We'll go into more details later. The second, coaching is a growing business. It is increasingly favored by business clients in learning and development programs, and it is establishing itself strongly in the well-being sector. I refer to the ICF 2020 survey that indicates that the estimated total global revenue from coaching in 2019 was $2.8+ billion, representing a 21% increase over the 2015 estimate. And the trend is towards more growth in the foreseeable future. The third point, increase in the number of coaches on the market. Again, the 2020 ICF survey estimates 71,000 coach practitioners in 2019, which is an increase of 33%, a third, of the 2015 estimate. And there are more and more coaches being trained and coming into the market. In France alone, for example, we count a bit more than 140 coaching schools. The fourth point, and some of you might have followed these events recently, is the fact that coaching platforms attract large investments. Most recently, $50 million for Coach Hub and $300 million for BetterUp, allowing for the much mediatized recruitment of Prince Harry of Sussex as its Chief Impact Officer. Aside from these two heavyweights, myriads of coaching platforms of all sorts pop up all over. So much so that it is really difficult to keep an up-to-date inventory. But the platforms undoubtedly attract coaches' clients and are positioning themselves firmly into our professional landscape. So, two coaching platforms. The digital technologies and the new business model to which I briefly referred to that impact coaching, they trump borders and they create a new global reality in our profession. So, from our perspective, the ICF France Committee on Digital AI and Coaching, it only made sense to look at them from a global perspective. So to do so, we reach out to colleagues in other ICF European chapters, and eventually we contributed to the launching of the ICF EMEA Global Task Force on Digital Technologies and Coaching. And the international dimension of this initiative and collaboration is worth highlighting. We shared insights on our respective markets, and we observed that coaching platforms were and are increasingly present in our landscape, and they are transforming it. So they certainly ride the advanced digital technologies bring and promise. They offer new opportunities, but they also raise many concerns. So we decided to look into it closer. And to do so, what did we do? We decided to do a survey. So between February and March 2021, the ICF EMEA Global Task Force designed and carried out a survey of its members, of the members of the ICF France, Germany, UK chapters, and of an ICF global panel of volunteers. The purpose of the survey was very clearly defined. It was to gauge the experience ICF coaches only, clearly, have had so far with coaching platforms, and to help define the role ICF should play towards them. I will share the survey results during this session and draw on its conclusions. You can also read the report that we produced. It is available as a handout. So to find our bearings in this, what looks a bit like a maze from the outside, allow me some initial definitions. The coaching platforms, we define them as services which use a website or a smartphone interface to provide functions. But we see that there are two major categories. They fall into two main categories. Service platforms, and again, we look at it from the perspective of coaches. That's who we are, right? So service platforms provide specific services that coaches usually pay for on a subscription basis. The coach pays. Contracting platforms offer coaches the opportunity to be connected with clients, and the coaches and the coaches are paid per coaching sessions or engagement. One, service platforms, the coach pays for the services. Contracting platform, the coach is paid for his or her services. Obviously, the various functions offered, and I will detail them in a minute, can be blended, and they can offer an array of functions. The admin of coaching engagements, such as scheduling, billing, client tracking, feedback, matching of clients and coach, the access to a coach bot, to a library of resources, including TEDx conferences, articles, etc., e-learning modules, virtual reality role plays, psychometric tools, other coaching tools, and recordings of sessions. I won't go into all the details of the technicalities of all these functions, but it's important that we keep them in mind. So now let's go on to the survey in terms of its results and numbers. But before that, allow me to explain a little bit its methodology. So it was developed in 3 languages, in English, French, and German, and it was distributed to the established global research panel of ICF Global, 5,000 volunteer coaches, members, through an ICF email campaign, and distributed through the ICF France, Germany, UK chapters. And both quantitative and qualitative data were collected and analyzed to gain insights into the effect these platforms have on the coaching profession. So to the results. In total, the survey, and I know you have all the details in the handout, but it's important to get a sense of it. It was clicked 851 times across all languages, 619 in English, 194 in French, 38 in German. But because some of the respondents said they did not use coaching platforms or because of too many missing data, we were left with 237 survey responses upon which this report is based. Clearly, it is not a massive set of data. It is useful enough, though, for a first approach, and it reflects exclusively the responses of those coaches who had experience with coaching platforms and felt compelled to answer. So what about, let's look at the demographics of what does this charter tell us? It is interesting, actually. It tells us that the coaches who completed the survey and whose results were taken into account are quite experienced. 35% having 11 or more years of coaching experience and 32 having 6 to 10 years of coaching experience. Of those having earned coaching credentials, 46% earned a PCC credential, 27% an ACC, and 6% an MCC. The percentage of respondents of the survey skewed more towards MCC and PCC credential holders than the overall membership of ICF. And again, pointing towards a more experienced set of respondents. The respondents also skewed to a higher age, with 64% age between 41 and 60 years old, and 20% of them 61 and above. So this is interesting. Again, it's the level of professional maturity coaches who have been answering display. If we go to the coach selection criteria briefly, and that would be interesting for us to try to understand how it plays to our interest there, is the fact that the selection criteria is essentially, it focuses on the credential level and the age of the coach training and specific credential. Oh, sorry. So the credential level and the age of the respondents are interesting indicators and can be explained by the fact that some of the coaching platforms deliberately choose to recruit more experienced coaches, and some also insist in their marketing material that their coaches are members of a professional coaching organization, such as ICF or EMCC. However, in interviews conducted in parallel to the survey, some experienced coaches who have joined a coaching platform explain that they value the convenience of the platform as a marketplace, while younger, less experienced coaches are concerned that they could be left out of the market. Of the coaches who answered and who gave us gender information, we have 67% female, 33 male, which is pretty much similar to the overall ICF membership statistics. And most of the coaches resided in 5 countries, France, Germany, Netherlands, and UK and US, which is not surprising since the survey was in English, French, and German. However, and interestingly for us, the total respondents span across 31 additional countries, which is an interesting indicator of the truly global reach of coaching platforms. So I mentioned that the most common qualification required were coach training and specific credentials. And what is interesting is that coaches have tested several platforms, the majority. And currently, most coaches use one platform, 62%, 26% use 2, and some people use 3 platforms. Now, going back to our definition, we see that the majority of our colleagues who answered the survey are using contracting platforms where the coaches is connected with clients and is compensated by session or engagement. The clients can be individuals seeking coaching or employees of an organization that has employed a coaching initiative within their organization. Some coaches are using service providers platforms where the platforms allow the coach to manage their clients, for example, through a variety of functions, and that help the coach manage and track their clients. The respondents provided the names of 66 unique platforms. However, some of the names given were those of video platforms, video conferencing platforms, such as Zoom, which is cheap and convenient, but only a video conferencing tool. This is not what we consider a coaching platform. So the confusion between tools of communication and coaching platforms reflects, interestingly, from my point of view, the various levels of familiarity with digital technologies in our coaching community. So for the contracting platforms, 3 stood out as the most popular and were roughly equal in popularity. BetterUp, which is based in California, Coach Hub, headquartered in Germany, and Move One, almost exclusively used by coaches residing in France. The most valued functions, the most important functions from our colleagues' perspectives were lead generation, the fact that it's easy to use, scheduling, and client management. And only 10%, and there are other elements, matching, flexibility, reliability, et cetera. But the relevant number, the most important numbers, you have them in the chart. What is also perhaps interesting is that very few of these platforms require the exclusivity from the coaches, which we can see since people have, worked for 2 or 3 coaching platforms. In terms of contract terms and conditions, regarding fees, for example, indicatively, less than 50% of the respondents with valid answers, etc., gave an amount of remuneration. Money is always a touchy subject in our profession. But for those who did, about half said that their hourly fee was between 30 and 120 US dollars. An interesting factor when it is correlated with the seniority of the coaches, as indicated before. Additionally, when asked about the fee split, how what is charged to the client is split between the platform and the coach, barely a quarter of the respondents answered. This would indicate that most likely the coaches didn't know, that the platform did not share this information with them, and maybe also that they did not ask. So, when asked one improvement they would like to see in their main platform, the most often requested were by far high pay and client matching capability. And nevertheless, despite the two latter points, lack of transparency on the fee split and low fees, 89% of the respondents said they were somewhat satisfied to very satisfied with their platform. So we'll move to an important aspect of it, which is ethics, and important not only because ethics is an important element when it comes to digital technology, whatever the sector, but because we are ICF and ethics is one of the pillars of one of our credos. So 2/3 of the respondents of the coaches said that they were required to sign an ethics agreement to use their platform, and 41% of the clients equally have to sign a ethics agreement. Interesting that it's not the majority of clients having to sign an ethics agreement, so maybe we should look into that. But very perhaps zooming onto this, the link between ethics and digital technologies per se and apply to coaching, is when it has to do with data and confidentiality. Of course, it's particularly sensitive, and I would say even more so, the fact that more than half the respondents stated that individuals working for the platform company or that the client's organization have access to the data in the platform. What is not known is exactly what data is accessible, the sensitivity of that data, and how that data is used. In any case, it obviously raises concerns about the respect of confidentiality, which is one of the pillars of the coaching relationship. Moving on to other functions and features in coaching platforms. Artificial intelligence is commonly accepted, is still pretty much in its infancy when it comes to coaching. So it is quite surprising that 17% of the coaches say that their primary platform has AI coaching function built in. They might be referring to the fact that some coaching platforms claim to use artificial intelligence, AI, in the matching of clients and coaches using objective criteria such as gender, language, professional experience, level of credential, type of coaching, etc. A little bit what find a coach of the ICF website, the categories we use, and I know that there are projects of revamping this at the moment. Some also say, some of the coaching platforms, that they use subjective criteria defined, for example, by value-based questionnaires to which both clients and coach answer, and then they are matched by an algorithm based on similarities. In any case, some coaching platforms, when it comes to AI, are already using natural language processing through machine learning. In other words, using AI, applying AI to data generated on the coaching platforms. Looking at maybe in a nod to more mature technology, 2/3 of our colleagues reported that e-learning is a component of their primary platform, and 1/4 of the coaches said that it includes some kind of psychometric tools. The use of psychometric tools is nothing new to coaching, right? We have long called upon them to trigger self-awareness for the client, to help define coaching objectives. But the hybridization of coaching with e-learning is a newer development, as well as the introduction of virtual reality into coaching platforms. A majority of the respondents, when asked about ICF role, said that ICF should be involved with coaching platforms. The primary desire is for some kind of action regarding standards, guidelines, regulations, followed by a means of ensuring ethical practices. To this effect, and independently from the EMEA Global Task Force that I mentioned earlier, that is behind the survey, ICF has announced last August the creation of an artificial intelligence coaching standards work group in collaboration with a group of AI coaching developers, some of them being coaches. This group's stated purposes are the following: guide the confluence of AI technology and coaching, provide a set of principles, capabilities, and requirements to enhance the quality of AI coaching, and to ensure that AI coaching is applied and helpful in ethical ways. The group plans to have an outline for the standard by the end of 2021, and there will be draft versions following up in 2022. But before the standards are defined and focusing specifically on coaching platforms, the ICF France Committee on Coaching, Digital and Artificial Intelligence, we have developed a set of fair and ethical guidelines to aid in choosing whether or not to work with a coaching platform. ICF Germany has also released a checklist for coaches and clients. You can see the link here at the bottom of this slide. I will review briefly these guidelines. You have them all in the handout. And they're basically based on our work for the last 3 years and upon the results of this survey. So the ethics, and we position that first and foremost, what code of ethics, who's signing it, who's defining, very important, the coaching contract, how is it framed, who defines the coaching objectives? Is it, classically a 4-way agreement, 3-way agreement, or is it defined by the client and the platform? What kind of feedback system is in place? Do you have access to it? Who looks at it? I mean, is it automated? Do you have no access to it? Questions. And in essence, the idea is that you decide which questions you think are important to you when you decide to work or not for a coaching platform. The professionalism. Okay, great. Yes, most of them would say that they employ professional coaches. Well, let's look into it closer. Which level of credentials, which proper qualification, minimum number of hours of coaching, training, supervision, etc., certification to use the psychometric tools. And what proofs of these qualifications are you required to present? For example, it would be a good place to use our badge of the various ICF credential levels that you put on, that the coach working for a platform puts on his or her profile, rather than the logo of ICF and EMCC, which are being kind of, taken by the platform without formal agreement from the coaching federations. Does the platform offer supervision? If so, who does it? Internally, externally, etc. Can the client choose from different coaches? The idea of the ranking, right? Of a bit like Airbnb, where coaches are ranked. The data management and confidentiality, as I mentioned earlier, this is really an important topic. And I believe that we as coaches really have a duty to ask these questions. Can you record your sessions? Can you use them for yourself? But how is confidentiality guaranteed? What type of data the platform monitors? Who has access to the data? How do they protect privacy? Is there a level of encryption of some kind? And how is the matching done? Is it a little bit haphazard? Is it man-made, or is it an algorithm, and based on which criteria? Using the ranking, like, in Airbnb, et cetera, et cetera. So all this is very important, that we gain a little bit of transparency on all these aspects. Terms and conditions, okay, fine. Type of contract, clarity on the contract. Do you pay? And there is nothing wrong in paying, it's individual decision, but do you have to pay? Do the requirement of exclusivity, the transparency about the fee split, which in my opinion is an important aspect, and the terms of cancellation of the contract. So, but you have all these guidelines, in the handout, so I don't want to spend more time in reading them word for word. But what I'd like to perhaps conclude with is the fact that coaching platforms are here to stay, and they have a wide margin for growth. In their marketing, they argue that they contribute to the democratization of coaching, and they certainly attract clients and coaches. Digital technologies have opened the door to what some call the augmented coach. In other words, digital technologies to the service of the coach and the client. However, others fear that the mechanization of coaching could bring in its wake the commoditization of coaching and the Uberization of coaches. Some even warn that coaches are actually the gravediggers of coaching, pointing to the fact that coaches are called upon to train AIs, artificial intelligence, to work with AI developers to enhance coachbots, machine that coach. Recently, ICF relayed a request for coaches to volunteer to record their session in which they used the GROW model. The data was to be fed to a machine learning AI to train a coachbot. Some coaches are also investors in digital coaching platforms. If we step back, one could argue that the ancestor of the digital coach was ELISA. It was the first ever chatbot. It was designed in 1966 at the MIT by Professor Joseph Weizenbaum. It was a text-based program that identified a relatively small number of keywords and simulated the conversation a therapist might have with a patient. If you Google that, if you look into it, search it, you will find the exact exchanges. These exchanges would sound familiar to many coaches, but Professor Weizenbaum was reportedly so annoyed that people confused the early chatbot ELISA with a real psychiatrist that he abandoned all research on artificial intelligence. And now the ELISA effect has now entered our vocabulary. In computer science, it is the tendency to unconsciously assume computer behaviors are analogous to human behavior. We're never far from anthropomorphism. Importantly, a reminder, ICF defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provocative and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. This partnership is grounded in the relationship between the client and the coach. In coaching, as in many aspects of our contemporary reality, digital technologies and AI in particular are changing the human interactions. Coaching is facing the recurring questions of which respective roles we assign to technology and to humans, and who defines the ethical boundaries in which all this operates. Stepping out of the coaching world for a moment and looking at the cutting-edge developments that are in the making, I recommend a useful article published by the news agency Reuters in September, and I will give you the link in the chat box. the article reports that since early last year, Google has blocked new AI features analyzing emotions, fearing cultural insensitivity, i.e. bias, while Microsoft, with its MSFT.O, restricted software mimicking voices, and IBM rejected a client request for an advanced facial recognition system. This echoes to some of the trends that we see vaguely emerging in coaching. So all these technologies were curbed by by panels of executive and other leaders. Their vetoes and the deliberations that led to them in this massive organization reflect a nascent industry-wide drive to balance the pursuit of lucrative AI systems with a greater consideration for social responsibilities. Though Google set up its ethics committee in 2017 and IBM in 2018, rights activists are concerned that they lack the necessary transparency and independence. Back to coaching and where digital and AI applications are finding their ways into our profession. Now and for the foreseeable future, we humans define and design these tools. In coaching, we must apply more than anywhere else, probably, what philosophers call the ethics of action, and choose how digital tools and AI in particular are used with transparent intentionality and mature ethical responsibility. We can apply the same mindful care and professional standards that we bring to a coaching conversation, where we define the intention and the objectives. We can apply that to the emerging coaching 5.0, starting with our profession itself. Will the coaching platforms set the standards of our profession instead of the professional coaching organization? What do we want coaching to be and become, and to what purpose? As professional coaches, we have the responsibility to answer these questions individually and collectively. And I hope that this session will have contributed to it. Thank you for your comments and feedback. You have the contacts for our committee on this website, on this slide, and link to our website. Thank you very much.